Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Study Legal English podcast. In today's episode, we look at an Act of Parliament. So first of all, we head over to www.legislation.gov.uk where we can find all the legislation in the UK. Then in the search box, I'm going to search for the Criminal Finances Act. You can see that you can search with the year here, and you can also search for primary or secondary legislation. So we're going to look at the Criminal Finances Act because it is not too long and it's a recent example of UK primary legislation. When you get to the Act, you can see that you can read it online or you can read it as a PDF. We will open it as a PDF. The first thing you see is the Royal Coat of Arms, which shows that this has received royal assent. The monarch has said, yes, I approve this Act. This can become law. The bill is then enacted. To enact means to make a bill a law. If you listened to the last podcast episode, you will remember that it is a constitutional convention that the monarch always says yes to an Act of Parliament, and it is rather symbolic to have this as part of the legislation-making process. After the Royal Coat of Arms, we have the short title here. And this says the Criminal Finances Act 2017. Then we have the chapter number. Every act in each year has its own unique chapter number. This says chapter number 22. This means that the Criminal Finances Act was the 22nd statute created in 2017. It was the 22nd statute to receive royal assent in that year. Next, we have a statement. Explanatory notes have been produced to assist in the understanding of this Act and are available separately. Explanatory notes are for laypersons, people who do not have a specific knowledge on the topic, in this case on the topic of law. They explain the important aspects of the Act in simple terms. Many Acts have these, and sure enough, if we go back, we can see the explanatory notes here. And if we click through, we could get a broad understanding of what the Act is about. Back to the Act, we then have a price. In this case, it is £27.50. The Acts are, of course, all free to download and print. However, it is also possible to order copies from professional printers, and the price is different depending on the length of the Act. Moving on, after the cover, we get the first page with, again, the Royal Coat of Arms, the short title, and the chapter number. Then we have the contents, and as you can see, there are parts and chapters. Here we have part 1, chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. Then there's part 2, part 3, and part 4. Later, we have, again, the Royal Coat of Arms with Elizabeth II. Again, we see the short title and the chapter number. However, the chapter number here has the date before it. It says 2017, chapter 22. This is known as the official citation. Then, here, we have the long title, which describes the act. It gives an overview of the purpose and content. In this case, it is an act to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, make provision in connection with terrorist property, create corporate offences for cases where a person associated with a body corporate or partnership facilitates the commission by another person of a tax evasion offence and for connected purposes. So this long title tells us that the Act amends, which means changes, a previous Act. The Proceeds of Crime Act 2002. It deals with terrorist property and it creates corporate offences. Further details about the offences are given in the Podcast Pro material. Moving on, this section is followed by the date of royal assent. This is the date when the monarch, the Queen, said yes to approve the bill, which had already passed through the previous legislative stages in Parliament, passing through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, being read, debated and voted on here. Here we can see that the date of royal assent is the 27th of April 2017. This means that the Act was enacted on this date. It passed from being a bill to being an Act of Parliament. Acts normally come into force on this particular date, on the date which is stated here. However, sometimes they state something different in the provisions of the Act. Next, we have a statement about how the Act will come into force. This is known as the Enacting Formula. It is a standard text and quite archaic, quite old-fashioned, and the text reads, "Be it enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lords Spiritual and Temporal and Commons in this present Parliament, assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows." This basically means that on the advice of the House of Lords, the Lords Spiritual and Temporal are members of the House of Lords, and the House of Commons, the lower house in the legislature, both of which make up Parliament, the Queen enacts or gives force to the bill. She makes the bill an act. Next, we have the main body, which is divided into sections, subsections, paragraphs, and subparagraphs. Here we can see Part 1, Proceeds of Crime, Chapter 1, which is entitled Investigations. The headings just give information about what this section is about. It is not part of the law or the rules. A section may be divided into subsections, and subsections are usually each numbered 1, 2, and so on. A subsection may then contain paragraphs, and these are given letters A, B, etc. Then there will be subparagraphs, which are normally numbered with Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4. You may be confused because this Act starts with section 362A. This is because this is an act to amend, to make changes to another previous act. Therefore, the sections relate to the sections it amends in the other act. New acts, which deal with new laws, of course, start with section 1. So let's take a look at section 362B and see how we could read some of these sections. If we want to read this one here, we would read this out loud as section 362B, subsection 4, paragraph B, subparagraph 1. And it would be written as S362B and then in brackets 4B1, all in separate brackets. If we wanted to say what this section says, we could state that section 362B subsection 4 paragraph B subparagraph 1 of the Criminal Finances Act 2017 states that the High Court must be satisfied that there are reasonable grounds for suspecting that the respondent is or has been involved in serious crime, whether in part of the United Kingdom or elsewhere. Some of those terms used here are part of the Podcast Pro material and feature in the vocabulary lists for Podcast Pro members. Later, when we scroll through, we can see these schedules, and schedules are normally at the end of an act and they give further details about principles, definitions and other information. And then after the schedules, you get to the end of the act. So for more information, you can head over to studylegalenglish.com.